Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're going to kick this off in another 30 seconds as participants are trickling in. So sit tight. All right, let's get this started. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us. My name is Johanna Lawton. I am a project manager at Rebuild by Design. Rebuild by Design is an organization that works in harnessing and cultivating strong stakeholder support in government leadership by bringing together global and local expertise, regional leadership, and a local vision to tackle multidimensional problems, predominantly climate adaptation challenges, though not always. And we do this through research and collaboration, research and advocacy, through place-based stakeholder engagements, as well as large-scale regional design competitions. And so before I kick things off into our program for this afternoon, I do want to cover just a couple of housekeeping events about today. One, we will be collecting any questions throughout the webinar through our Q&A function. So please, if you have any questions, put them in our Q&A and they will be addressed at the end of the webinar. And please refrain from putting anything in the chat unless you have very specific questions or resources you would like to share with the hosts or panelists. I also would like to give a huge thank you and shout out to my colleague Rafal Imam, who has put together this great event for this morning and for you all. So without further ado, why we're all here? Because we are experiencing increasing number of challenges from heavy rainfall here in New York City and around the world. And with that, we know there are numerous lessons that we can learn from others to inform what we are doing here in New York City. So Rebuild by Design has been working on this challenge predominantly since the aftermath of Hurricane Ida, researching and investigating and trying to put forward recommendations for how the city can address challenges and opportunities to transform our city into a sponge through nature-based blue-green infrastructure, as well as through changes through our governance and budgeting. And we have been working with One Architecture and Urbanism to launch the Rainproof New York City initiative, which brings together stakeholders from all around the city, including government, community-based organizations, private sector, philanthropy, et cetera. The list goes on, all with the goal of adapting to live with more water, to safely adapt with more water. And we are doing that currently with a partnership with New York City that brings together a plethora of city agencies alongside our community-based organizations and community leaders, other nonprofits and private sector, to co-create and to propose collective solutions that address three major challenges around addressing heavy rainfall. So we have three working groups that are focusing in on three specific challenges that they are driving towards to put out in June, that we hope to collect a ton of input and feedback from other New Yorkers throughout the way. Those challenges include shifting New York City's policies and priorities to create a comprehensive plan to prepare for increasing rainfall, informing the development of an equitable buyout program for New York City, and then building capacity among communities, the private sector, and CBOs to share responsibility for managing increased heavy rainfall, because we know that every single drop counts. To accompany this initiative and to ensure that we are all collectively building our knowledge and capacity for addressing these challenges, we have convened and are launching here today a series of events. So thank you again for joining us for the kickstart of this series. Next week, we will be hosting an event on the success story in Hoboken's, focusing in on the stormwater resilience parks. That'll be taking place March 14th at noon. You can scan the QR code, and also my colleague Rafal will be sharing out those links. Then the following week, on April 18th, we will have author Rosetta S. Elkin in conversation with other experts on climate migration and buyouts and talking about Landscapes of Retreat, her book, which focuses in on what happens to the land after buyouts. Again, I encourage you to scan the QR code. You can go on our website where we have a calendar of these events. If you look up Rainproof New York City, Rebuild by Design, and also those links will be in the chat. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our incredible host for today. Tanya Gale is the Executive Director of Green City Force. Thank you so much for joining us, Tanya. And take it away. The mic is yours.
Oh, wonderful. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Johanna. I have to really give it a huge shout out to the Rebuild by Design team. They are small but mighty, and they've really pulled a lot of amazing local and global work together. So I'm really happy to be part of the Rainproof NYC team, and I'm co-chair of the Working Group 3 group, focusing on how everybody has a role to play across the city. So we're thrilled to have this presentation today talking about managing rain, international lessons from two leading communities that have been driving incredible change. So we're going to hear from two leaders in this work. First, we're going to hear from Lykke Leonardsen to talk to us about the work that Copenhagen has been leading. And then we're going to hear from Locher, who is also part of the Rainproof NYC steering committee and has been a real leader to get us started to think about how New York can transform in ways that lead to equitable and safe communities going forward. So I'm going to shift now to an overview of Lykke. You can go to the next slide, please. And we're really pleased and thrilled to have her join us today. Ms. Lykke Leonardsen has worked with urban development for the past 25 years in Copenhagen. This includes local regeneration projects, international urban policies, and communication. Since 2008, she has worked for the Technical and Environmental Administration in charge of making Copenhagen more blue and green, in charge of water management and green infrastructure planning. It was as part of this work that the city's climate change adaptation plan was developed. From 2014 to 2016, she was the head of the climate unit in charge of the climate change adaptation program and the city's ambitious plan to be the first carbon neutral capital of the world before 2025. That's amazing. Since 2016, she has been head of program for resilient and sustainable city solutions. Ms. Leonardsen has a master in Near Eastern archaeology and master of public policy. Please join me in welcoming her, and thank you, Lykke, for joining us today. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me here. I am really happy to have the opportunity to present a little bit about what we are doing in the city of Copenhagen. I will talk about one part of our climate adaptation work, namely the cloudburst planning. Cloudburst is what we call heavy rain in Denmark. Okay, now I can't get it to move. That was exactly what I was hoping not would happen. Hang on a second. This one. Okay, now it works. Copenhagen is the capital of Denmark, located by the sea, and we are also the biggest, not in size, but in numbers of biggest city and the biggest municipality in Denmark. So we, as you can see by our location, we have a lot of challenges when it comes to water. We are also sort of a city that has been celebrated for our quality of life. I will not go into detail here, but just saying that they're sort of the most livable city has been a title that we've been awarded several times. And it's also one of the things that we are trying to bring into our climate adaptation work. We started back in 2008-9 about making the adaptation plan, actually inspired by another Dutch city, not Amsterdam, but Rotterdam, and also a little bit about what was going on in New York, looking at what would the future bring for Copenhagen, saying that sort of identifying the main risk being rain, and that was also sort of the threat that was coming to us the fastest. But over time, sea level rise will actually also be a huge challenge for the city. Then something happened in 2011. We actually got a little bit of taste of what the future would be like. A little bit like Hurricane Ida here for you in New York. This was also a sort of a wake-up call for the city saying, okay, this is what happens when we have what was called a 1,000-year storm. And it totally showed that the city was not prepared for this. We did not have sufficient infrastructure in our sewers. So there was a lot of flooding. It cost an awful lot of money. And it led to the development of the so-called cloudburst management plan. And the whole idea was actually to create an, a supplementary or an extra infrastructure where we would be following the level, the way water would flow on the surface in case of heavy rains. And the idea is not, I mean, you can see the picture doesn't represent rivers and streams in Copenhagen, but actually is a model of how water will flow. And based on that, we divided the city into catchment areas and did a detailed study on how to actually move forward with managing a lot of this water, mainly on the surface. So that was the idea of this, was actually surface projects. It was a coordinated, a connected system, focusing on greening and also looking at what could be other issues that we could tackle at the same time. So the types of solutions that we developed in part of this was actually cloudburst boulevards or cloudburst streets that streets designed for transporting water. It's about somewhere you need to go underground. You can't all the time have room enough on the surface. Retention boulevards, that streets delaying the water, preventing it from running downstream too fast. Areas where we could store water, it could be in parks or other places where you can actually keep the water, again, preventing it from going outside and flooding. And finally, sort of like smaller things equal to what in New York is also the green infrastructure program with like rain gardens and things like that on smaller streets. We also managed to change the national legislation, making it possible for us to actually finance this. So we very uniquely, I think, for many cities around the world, actually have a plan that is financed from the very beginning. And the division is that the city will take care of everything that is not directly related to water management and pay for that, whereas our utility, which is a separate entity from the city, but publicly owned, is taking care of everything that has to do with stormwater management. So we are looking at a project with more than 200 projects, a lot of pipes and tunnels, more than 200 years. Here it says 200 years. It's going to be more. And actually also an investment cost for a city that has around 650,000 people, a cost of $1.8 billion, just to give you an idea. And then you can try and add it up to what it would be like in New York. And the method was actually then, when we started working on this, we subdivided the catchment areas into smaller areas and actually made very detailed hydraulic analysis so that we can see how much can we actually manage, what is going on planning-wise and so on. And also looking at other potential. I mean, what is the potential for greening the city, making the city nicer, and also having a discussion of what is the order of implementation so that we are sure that we are not creating something that will be moving the problem from one area to another area, because that was a specific wish from our politicians that we did not do that. So we have the measures here just to show you. These are the big tunnels, smaller pipe projects, cloudburst streets, retention boulevards, retention areas, and all the green streets, just to give you an idea how it all actually moves around in the city and adds up to a new system. And then you can see here how we are moving from the catchment area to a smaller master plan and into the final cloudburst project. But at the same time, always making sure that we have full control of the water in the process, because it's a connected system. One of the key things of what we're doing is to look at how can we create a better city? How can we actually also solve some of the other issues that a growing city is facing? It's about having more recreational value. It's something that we really learned through COVID. It's about more biodiversity, creating meeting places, also through that creating a social resilience that can be a crucial matter in the future, improving health, also by improving the microclimate, tackling urban heat island effect, even though, I mean, in Denmark, normally it's not a very hot country, but we are seeing in the future, we are going to have much warmer summers, so that it will actually also be an issue. We are creating synergy with local urban renewal projects, using this as an opportunity to upgrade local neighborhoods, and also by that looking at equity issues, making sure that the benefits from this actually is coming to the most vulnerable areas in the city. We can look in the future also on rainwater recycling. We will also face shortage of water, increase accessibility and safety, help economic growth, and work with the architecture and the local identity to create places that fit the environment where they're actually located. And all of this is also done in very close connection with our residents. The idea is that all big projects have a high degree of resident involvement, because it's important what is actually going to happen on the areas when it's not raining, that these areas can then be used for recreational activities. And we need the local residents to actually help us decide what that activity is going to be. There are lots of challenges here. One of them, big one, is actually storing capacity, that also where we run into environmental issues of cleaning the water due to the EU Water Frame Directive, which is sort of equal to the Clean Water Act that you've got in the US. And just sort of to show you a few examples, this is our very first project that we made. This is a retention area where we used a very, very derelict part of the city to create a beautiful new square, increasing the green space and increasing retention areas. Here in a housing area where it's sort of much more loose and a nature-based solution, a big square and a street in this city also, where the idea has been to increase the number or the area that is where we take away the hard pavement, replacing it with trees and green, and actually making a small almost little forest that can be used by local residents and are being used by local residents. And when these actually grow even bigger, it will actually make a huge impact also on urban heat issues, but still having room for traffic. But the traffic areas will the streets take up much less space than they did before. This project is out in one of the poorest neighborhoods in Copenhagen, where we have created this retention area and a green area. This is actually where I started my career in the city, and it's fantastic to see how this actually contributes to social life in this neighborhood. A big park, one of our biggest projects is a big park that is actually transformed into a huge reservoir on the surface through a surrounding wall around the park, and also with areas in the park that are lowered and can be used for storage in smaller rain events. And this way is a way of making things also a lot cheaper. It's one of the reasons why we chose this model with Surface Solution, is that it's normally about half the price of making the underground solutions. Here you can see the retention wall that is actually also being part of the furniture in the park, with benches alongside it, so that you don't see it as a cloudburst project when you enter the park. I've actually had people from New York City going here and saying, I mean, it doesn't look like a cloudburst project. And that's the whole idea. It's actually about making good places that can have this double function. Another is this street with 8 sunken gardens, each with a different theme, and each with these sunken areas that can be used as a reservoir and an elevated boardwalk leading citizens around it, creating a totally new activity in an area where there was nothing happening before. You can see another side of that visit or of that street. And finally, the Cloudburst project in a park in one of the socially deprived neighborhoods. It was a very closed park. Nobody wanted to go there. It felt quite insecure. But by opening it up and creating activities like this, we've been able to make it a destination park for people going out on weekends, and also having these green areas in the park where you can have the storage of the water as part of the design. What are our challenges? Well, there are lots of challenges. I have worked also with New York since 2015, so I know a lot of what's been going on here. And one of the things is that the world is changing and the cities are changing, the weather and the climate is changing. So we need to think about adaptive planning. We need to have look into how citizens have different wishes to urban life. Some want peace and quiet and others want a lot of activities. How do we actually fit into that? And there's a lot of existing infrastructure in the city, both above ground but especially underground. If you have a city like Copenhagen that's close to 1,000 years old, we have a lot, and it's not always where the map shows. There's the clash of professions, the fact that the different types of professions need to work together in a way that they're not used to, and that's a big challenge. And governance challenges is, and this really goes also for New York City, it's really important to involve all city agencies from the beginning. This is not just a project for DEP in New York, it's actually something that needs to involve traffic, the DOT, the Parks Division, the Planning Division, and so on, in order to get the right results. And also have both internal and external stakeholders as a key part, and to make sure that you have the constant organizational and political backup. There's an economic pressure of keeping prices low and keeping adaptation from stopping economic development in the city. And also here you could find that there are a clash of professions in the fact that this also challenges the way that the city has been running, and it's a paradigm shift, and we need to be able to handle that. So there are lots of challenges. So the key lessons from Copenhagen, I would say, is the multidisciplinary collaboration. That's key. If it's not there, then you will not get a good result. Projects are always more complicated than you expect, and you have to deal with that. The challenges of existing practices I've mentioned several times is key. And you need sometimes to really be able to think outside the box. You need to think in an innovative way to find new solutions. And there's a need to actually constantly rework plans so that you're sure that they fit into the situation that you're in right now. And again, for us, creating this connected system, the knowledge of the hydraulic connection between the projects is really crucial in order to make sure that you have full control of the water you want to manage. And there's also the idea of the urban space potential depending on knowledge of water management. You have to understand what kind of trees can tolerate the shift between drought and being flooded and so on. So there's a lot of these things that you need to consider as part of it. So all in all, there are lots of lessons, and I'm happy to say that our work with New York has also shown that New York is learning from Copenhagen. Thank you so much. This was my words so far.
Thank you very much, Lykke. That's a lot of really rich content. I love the visuals. I think I might have been to that park in Copenhagen. That was amazing. So we're going to hold questions until the end, because part of the reason we designed this program the way we did is because we want everyone to hear from the Copenhagen model as well as the Amsterdam model, so we can sort of holistically then lean into getting everyone's expertise questions answered by these wonderful climate leaders. So up next, we have Locher, who is the International Director for Climate for One Architecture. She's also part, as I mentioned before, the steering committee for Rainproof NYC and a very active, important guide for our Working Group 3 working group. So really, really excited. I'm happy to have heard some of this before, but I'm always happy to hear and learn more from Lot. Prior to joining One as the International Director of Climate, Locher set up the now internationally acknowledged initiative Amsterdam Rainproof in 2013, linking her international experience in architecture, urbanism, and landscape architecture to urban climate adaptation. Based on its success, Lot scaled up the program, combining it with other successful network approaches to urban climate adaptation into a new nationwide organization. Together manager for WaterNet, the utility company of the Water Board, Amstel, and GUI and Beck, and the water tasks of the municipality of Amsterdam. She helped to make the low-lying metropolitan region of Amsterdam future-proof. At One, Lot combines her experience of setting up programs and initiating public-private networks with practical design, experience in climate and water projects, such as cloudburst resilience, heat, drought, and flood-proof and sustainable urban development. Her drive and social skills help her stimulate change in the policies and practices of the various actors in the urban realm. I've seen that firsthand myself, so I know it's true. Really happy to have you with us, Lot. Over to you.
Thank you. I just had to find a video. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me and having me speak here. The title of my conversation is actually We're All in This Together and How to Make Every Action Count. And I have exactly the same problem, Lykke, as you had, that I don't manage to. I do. To understand a bit like how that had happened in the Netherlands, I was thinking like maybe for people in New York, it's good to know where Amsterdam is in the Netherlands, and especially as the Netherlands is a country which is located in the delta of many different rivers. And on the map on your left-hand side, you see an area in purple. And actually that area in purple is what is at the moment with the current sea level under sea level. So if you imagine that sea level rise is coming, then you will think like, oh, this country is actually really prone to flooding. And that you can see on the right-hand side. And the historical location of this delta country has made that we have actually quite an elaborated water governance system and are experts in how to manage this. And what you can see as well is when you look at where Amsterdam is, that is green. So something was done well when they were placing Amsterdam 750 years ago. And you see here a section of how what Amsterdam looked like. And yes, similar like Copenhagen, we have a lot of water in the city and within the city. And not only the open surface water, which you can see on the photo, but also our groundwater is extremely high, meaning that actually our parks, one of our parks, need to have foundations under our trees in order not to have them being sinking in a swampy area. So we knew, and we thought we knew that how to deal with water and how to make it all count. And as I said, we also have a different governance structure for it. Like people, the city who is responsible for sewage system, groundwater, drinking water, shipping and waterways, and actually a political board, the water boards, who are responsible for the dikes and the water levels and the water surface treatment and cleaning the water. And Amsterdam is unique in it that they have one water cycle company, WaterNet, who is actually bringing both these political entities together so that they are looking at all the water cycle for it. So we thought, or Amsterdam thought and WaterNet thought that we had it under control until actually the cloudburst from Copenhagen. Because when Lykke was telling us, I think it was in a conference in 2013, what had happened in Copenhagen in 2011, actually the people in the water board and in the WaterNet were looking at each other and thought like, if this is happening in Copenhagen, how good and protected are we? And do we have, by the fact that we have actually outsourced all this work to one company, made it even less rainproof for the future? Because people will just look at WaterNet and think they will solve it. And we also knew that, like Copenhagen, we would get more rain during the whole year, and we would get more heavy rain or cloudburst events in particular times. So unlike Copenhagen, we didn't have that event yet, but they were thinking like, how can we make it make something that can protect us and make it can change the city during the process and to make it more rainproof. And they came up with a different governance model. And they called it Amsterdam Rainproof. And it's a governance model where they said like, it's actually a program which they set half outside and half inside the government, which was a new thing. It's a kind of a border object, they called it. And the program consisted of that they came up with a whole new team where there were half of the team were actually civil servants who were in their normal job working either in Waternet or in the city, and half of the team, and that was also me, were employed directly from the private sector, because they felt like if we haven't managed it in our public works and the way we have done all our public works till now, we need some other inspiration, some other experience, and some other way of working. So they brought this private sector and this public sector together. And we called it Amsterdam Rainproof, and we were lucky because the city allowed us even to communicate in our own way, with our own logo, with our own catchphrase, with every drop counts. And we came up with this in order to say like, okay, we don't have the money because there hadn't been an event, so there hadn't been an urgency yet. We don't have the money to study first, like what is the best way to do this. We need to see that actually all the little actions make it count. You see here photos of a rain event, because after half a year after we started, it did have a smaller cloudburst in Amsterdam, which created some additional urgency for us. So what did we learn from this project and how did we do it? And I think the one extreme important thing is that we came up with this thing that a network strategy is key. And what do we mean with a network strategy? It's actually, what we think of it is that you have to think of a social network. Like that we say like, okay, if you see that there's 60% of the city is privately owned and many people are actually influencing or contributing every time that a physical transformation of your roof, of your garden, of your yard, of the street, of the park, of the neighborhood is taking place, all these different people that are involved in there should become rainproof in their actions and should be connected to each other so that they can build on each other. So Amsterdam Rainproof as a team and as a program was actually really established to connect and facilitate all these stakeholders involved. And facilitate with knowledge, facilitate with sometimes a bit of funding, sometimes with connecting, sometimes with entrances. And when I talk about stakeholders, I do mean also different departments in the government, knowledge institutes, designers, the civic society, the NGOs, but also entrepreneurs like and even the financial sectors like insurance companies, or the garden retail centers and developers. And I want to give some quick examples of how we did that. We saw the departments, the municipality, as a key stakeholder, and we try to make them take their public role really seriously and saying like, if we can link Rainproof to all the actions that they're normally taking, then we can immediately get it mainstreamed into their policy and actions. So therefore, we analyzed like how, when you change a street, who are the key responsible persons from the different moments that it happened? What are the policies? What are the manuals? And every time we try to twist that and say like, okay, you do what you do, but you have to do it rainproof. And of course, like Copenhagen, we also made models of the city and to see like where it would go wrong. We made risk assessments from where are the vulnerable communities, the vulnerable assets like hospitals. And these two combined, we managed to get into a map of the major bottlenecks of Amsterdam. And we got actually a political assignment to solve these bottlenecks within 5 years for the red one, 10 years for the blue one, and 15 years for the green ones. And these green ones are not it's green, but it's not good. So we had been looking at what Copenhagen was doing, and we're looking at similar things for ourselves. And we came up also with these rainproof maps with similar kind of typologies of streets, so that when somebody is working in an area, when somebody is changing a street, or when somebody is changing a square, they know at least where they have to get the water towards and where the water is directed to. And in this way, we help to make every investment in the city become rainproof. And like Lykke, what Lykke was saying, it's so correct, and we see it also happening in New York. One of the most important things, if you think of the public work, it's really that cross-departmental collaboration is the key. And these 3 people here on the photo in the rain are actually heroes of mine, because they managed. So one is the one from the DOT, so the traffic engineers from a big streets there. One is the public space designer, and the one who's really laughing is the one from Waternet, who's extremely happy that this park has been changed to store a lot of water under the park. But why was it so difficult? Because the water had to come from the neighborhood, and it had to cross a big road, and it had therefore the alignment of work of that road and the lowering of the threshold and of the curb had to come exactly at the same time as opening this park with retention underneath. So these 3 men did make that happen. We also, by Rainproof, linked innovations in polder roofs, innovations with different tiles to specific locations for piloting, but also to see like if we could change and help them with changing some regulations so that the innovations could be upscaled. And we help the housing associations, of course, an important stakeholder for us, because there's so many social housing in the Netherlands and in Amsterdam, to see like how they could come up with business cases, also to make and with help from funding from Europe, to make their roofs green and blue, and to change their gardens. As we said, we worked with local communities and like local businesses. Like for instance, we established with somebody else the Rain Watch. These are advisors, local advisors, who are on different places advising people in their gardens how to do this differently. And we gave education to plumbers to see like how they can change the plumbing so that it becomes more rainproof. But we also worked with other companies and try to see like how they can help, because if something has happened, people don't go to the government, they go to insurance companies, and the insurance companies wanted to reduce their amount of the money that is being claimed, of course, and the risk for that. And we wanted them to advise in a better way afterwards, and we knew that they had the information from where things went wrong, so that we could inform again our policy. So we worked very closely together with some big insurance companies on that. An important one which we did was looking always like, where does a citizen go for their advice? So I said already, insurance companies after an event. However, it was also about like where do you go before and when you don't even know anything about rain, when you haven't had a flood happening. And people in the Netherlands, when they change their garden, they go to garden retail centers. So we made a big program in order to educate the people on the shop floor, to help them to promote products that are more rainproof. And this started in Amsterdam, is now nationwide, that all these garden retail centers in the Netherlands have these kind of climate marketplaces where they show like how you can do a rainproof garden. Of course, it didn't only stay with like, making education, but it also was with actions, because it really is about taking all the actions into account. So we managed to combine people who were volunteering for different NGOs with the garden retail centers, with the housing associations, by rainproofing gardens and helping them to connect, so that also people who can't maintain their gardens have a continued volunteering workforce to help them. But I have heard amazing stories in New York that you do similar things. One thing which was really interesting is that, because we said like, okay, how can we make it also fun, and how can it become differently? And if we know that we have to take out all these concrete pavers from the garden, can we make it into a game? And Amsterdam is quite in competition with Rotterdam on the soccer field, which is our main sport. So you have to think of Amsterdam like New York with LA, that kind of competition. So we came up with first, and we called it immediately the National Championship Depaving. And we came up with a competition between Amsterdam and Rotterdam. We did it first 1 year just between these 2 cities. The next year it was already between most of the municipalities in the Netherlands. The third year it was all the municipalities in the Netherlands. And now we are competing against Belgium to see which municipality takes out the most tiles, and they count the tiles and they take them away, and that municipality gets the win. So that is already a communication. And what we learned is that really clear communication helps. So we came up with a communication strategy where we made an online platform with showing what kind of measures you had, a toolbox for that, but also with posters and pamphlets and always trying to explain it in an easy and kind of a way, which was telling always like, okay, what is happening and how it is relating to themselves, and then what can they do. For instance, we made this folder for gardeners, for actually professional gardeners, to show the one image on the left shows like what happens, how can you, it says like it's raining often harder and your garden can't handle it. So we always linked it to your roof, your garden, your street, your neighborhood. And then this is what you can do to make it happen. And we showed the examples of what you can do with measures. And then for this one, it was interesting because we gave the gardeners a place where they could place a stamp, because they might not have the money to make those folders, but they were happy to have those folders so that they can promote their work. So in that way, it was a win-win. And we created public campaigns for awareness. We did them first ourselves. That didn't work at all. That was one of our biggest mistakes we ever did. So we noticed that actually we had to combine with people that really were good in this and had done this already before. And we managed to change our Times Square of Amsterdam. For one day, we made it green, and for the Rainproof Rave and Ride. And we got politicians there. We got into, our water advisor there, and all kind of different people in order to get an audience that wasn't normally looking at those things. And this thing of audience is something that people in our network, and not ourselves, we're not so creative, but our people in our network were really targeting and hearing our story and said like, okay, we can bring this to a different audience. So one way to bring it to a different audience was by the fact that they thought like, okay, we have rain at the moment. When it comes on the roof, it goes into the drainage, it flows away. What a pity, can't we do something with it? Not only by using it for the plants, why don't we make beer out of it? So they started to brew beer and they called it rain beer. And on the back of the beer bottle, there was our story of that it's going to rain harder and what they can do with a link to our platform. And of course, the people drink beer are not always the ones who were thinking of sustainability, because they were just drinking beer in events and festivals. And then these people, these creative people, were thinking it one step further and said like, if we want to go to festivals, why don't we bring a rain bar? And the rain bar is the only bar in the Netherlands where it rains in the happy hour. And it rains inside. So you go inside and you put on a raincoat and you ring a bell, and then you buy a rain beer, and then all kind of water comes on you, and you hear the story, what you have to do. So it's really kind of creating awareness and reaching a different audience. And sometimes we had to come and enjoy help from very unexpected sources, like this one. This is a famous actor in the Netherlands, and he came up with somebody else with a story that he heard that you had to do a lot about rain. So why don't we make green roofs on all the cars where he grows his own food? And that he collects the water for the irrigation of the roof, of the green roof, and for the cleaning of the car. And this was just going viral at the time because of the famous actor. Of course, he was making it with a kind of a joke towards us, but we managed to be very happy with it. We also learned lessons. And the big lesson, and I know that this is also a big question for New York, is how to deal with maintenance. And we learned it in the hard way. The hard way was that we made a really brilliant sustainable drainage area with retention area, but we hadn't taken the people from maintenance on board immediately in the design, and we hadn't talked it through with them totally. So after the first rain and after the first maintenance, they completely changed it, and the maintenance was done in such a way that it wasn't raining anymore. So we had to redo it. So the real lesson is design and maintenance are one, and you can never do it separately, if it is for small scale or big scale. The other lesson we learned was that you have to use an effective scale for connecting all these stakeholders. So we started in Amsterdam, but there were stakeholders like these insurance companies, like the garden retail centers, like the project developers. They didn't want to talk with just any city and all this time with these cities, because they were working on these different cities. So we came up from Rainproof and with help of all the others with this new platform, this Together Climate Adapt. And we saw which which networks you have to connect on a countrywide scale and which networks you can't do on a city scale. And we learned a lesson from our neighbors in Rotterdam. And this is the one where I'm really jealous about. I mean, I'm jealous about many things of Rotterdam in their beautiful square and in other things where they were starting with. But they managed to see how to price a gallon of rainwater. And by putting a price on a gallon of rainwater, they managed in this kind of a similar way as, or maybe we can discuss that later, but in a fact that you can do financing from the utility company towards making it a more green area. And I'm still trying to see like if this is something we could do, if Amsterdam could do this as well. And the last lesson learned, and this is one from the last years, is that in Amsterdam, we started with Amsterdam Rainproof, and we managed to get almost so many ingrained in many policy, many actions. But at the same time, and it started with rain because it's visible, it's catchy, but we found out that heat and river flooding and definitely also drought, and these are all kind of things that either are not visible or not happening that often, that they were becoming more and more urgent as well. So Amsterdam Rainproof has changed its approach now from Amsterdam Rainproof to Amsterdam weatherproof. And in order to take all these different extreme weather events, but still connecting and still working on this similar kind of social network. And why do we do this? In order to get all these public space projects and in order to get every private space project on streets, in gardens, in roofs, in squares, everywhere, because we say, you do what you do, but you do it rainproof. Thank you.
Wow. That was a lot of amazing content. Thank you both. So we're gonna do a couple things now. I see that there are a bunch of questions going into the chat, which is wonderful. And we're gonna bring back Lykke and Lot to help answer some questions from folks. I have a few myself. Johanna and Rainfall are going to help me manage the chat, but I'm going to just kick it off for both of you, either or both, however you want to answer. With a lot of the things you talked about are related to my questions, but just sort of big picture. Amazing programs, amazing models. Sounds like Rotterdam as well as folks we should get to know and visit. But what would you say jumps out as, knowing what you know about New York City? Both of you have some good experience understanding how our city works. What parts of your plans stand out as highlights you feel like New York City should lean on versus some things you're doing that wouldn't necessarily translate to a New York City plan? Just what sort of comes to mind if you think about that question.
As I said in my presentation, Copenhagen has worked with New York since 2015, and we can see that this collaboration has actually led to the fact that New York is adapting some of the things that comes from Copenhagen's cloud-based management program, and it became very clear after Hurricane Ida with the development of the new normal program and also funding for a number of specific cloud-based neighborhood also in New York. I think that what New York can really learn is the combination, actually combining things. I think New York is such a huge city, and I mean, the agencies are literally little kingdoms. And they, I know you are a republic, but sometimes your agencies work as little kingdoms, and it's really difficult to get them to collaborate and to understand. And even within an organization like DEP, I mean, I think there could be a lot done. Also, I mean, the social issue is huge. I mean, the inequity inequality is much larger in New York than it is both in Amsterdam and in Copenhagen. So I think that a lot could be done that could actually also be a help to local communities. It could be on food production. It could be on also general upgrading to, I mean, I've been out in some of the areas that we are working on with New York, like in Southeast Queens. And some of these housing projects by nature, they're definitely not something they say, that's the way I want to live. And the areas around them have, I mean, the air of being, forgotten. And some of these projects could actually help upgrade these neighborhoods and restore some of the pride of the neighborhoods in the citizens, and also work, I mean, instead of spending all the money on public projects in the wealthy areas, spend a lot more out there. And by combining money from parks, from transportation, and from the stormwater management, you can actually get much more value out of the same amount of dollars.
Well, you must have been reading my mind about the money question, so I appreciate you, and the equity one as well. So thank you for blending those. Lot, you want to add anything to that question or comment?
Yeah, of course, I completely agree with Lykke in sense of like what the thing that I noticed when I started to work in New York, like this cross department. I mean, we thought it was different called in Amsterdam, but it is nothing compared to what it is in New York. We thought that we had difficulties with getting the city to fund different things in different neighborhoods. But again, the scale is so different that it is nothing compared. I think the thing from Amsterdam Rainproof and for New York is really this kind of I think New York could benefit by working more closely with the private sector. And I'm always amazed, and I've always learned from New York how they worked with communities and with NGOs. But for sometimes for strategic implementations to work together with private sector, which are a bit scary. I mean, I was scared to start working with insurance companies, for instance, or I was, like I saw them as the bad guy somehow, as a public sector person at the time. But I think that is really like where you see that the shift can take place. And if New York can learn how to do that and still keep their mind on the equity and still keep their mind on their, that this has to happen for everyone, then I think New York is also an amazing place to make things happen fast, because that is something which I've learned as well. If New York sets its mind and New Yorkers set their mind to something, it goes so much faster than what I expect and what I see in the Netherlands. So I'm extremely impressed with that.
Well, I'm happy to hear that you think of New York as fast, so that's helpful. So I love the fact that you both leaned in on things that are near and dear to many of us, but certainly my work at Green City Force, we're focused in public housing communities across the 5 boroughs. We're training young people, the next generation, to be positioned for careers in climate solutions. And so I'd love to get your thoughts on given that, we know what happened 100 years ago, going forward is going to be different. We know that climate change is going to dramatically change the way the government services our city. And I think I'm interested to hear in what ways each of your cities have focused on readying a workforce. Like, are there ways that you've worked with younger people or emerging generations of folks that were going to be, replacing the current workforce going forward? Or how did you work to be intentional about intergenerational contributions and careers tied to the transitions in your cities?
I think what has been done in Copenhagen actually comes in different levels, because we need also to start from the, I'll start from the top and then go down, or maybe not top, but the most educated, you could say, looking at the academic institutions, because we need a new type of planners to be educated in order to be able to work this way. Planners that are not simply focusing, not just sewage engineers or not just traffic planners, but actually planners with a much more holistic view, and especially also one that has a type of planners that have the view of climate and climate emergencies, and what needs to be done here. And then when you sort of start implementing, there's a lot of things that need to do of educating the entrepreneurs, the constructors, contractors who are actually performing the work. Because I've also found that there's a lot of I mean, resistance there because they want to do things the way that they have always been doing things. So there's a need for an education there, and that's where we need the educations of people who are actually going into the contracting entrepreneurial world to actually see if they can adapt here. And finally, I mean, Lot mentioned maintenance. Maintenance is a big thing also for us in Copenhagen, and it's a big challenge. And therefore, we really need training of maintenance people. And it also means that we need to get, when we are hiring, we need to look for different types. And I think that will be very obvious in the future. We do not have a huge unemployment problem in Denmark. Actually, we do have sometimes the opposite. I mean, we have almost full employment. So we haven't had the need to actually make like job creation measures as part of it. So I can't say much about that. I don't know if you have more experience with that, Lot.
No, at the moment, of course, you go like any country through a moment that there is a recession with not enough jobs, and then at the moment there is a problem. There's not enough workforce, and what the government found out is that actually Rainproof is a way to get younger people into the government because they saw this kind of a different type of approach of programs. So they felt like, hey, it might be fun to work for the water sector. And as I said, our program was really focusing as a goal to do capacity building. So to educate different people was one of the main things to do. And we always looked then for the organization that was doing that kind of education. So we would have linked with you in Green Forest immediately to see like, okay, how can we make it a bit more rainproof if it isn't yet? Or we we did a whole education programs for primary schools. Where we gave them lessons and where teachers could see, and we linked it also to their green schoolyards. We gave a whole education lesson to high schools, as well as to kind of, the universities that were for the gardeners, for the planners. And then, as I said, like, the plumbers, some of the workforce. But every time we linked that then to the people who were already educating them. So that we understood like what are the constraints for trying to get a new education in there or to get their attention focused and different. I still think that we are not doing enough with how to bring in all the youth and all the diversity of the youth. And that's something we can learn from in New York. I do have the feeling that that is something that there is an energy there that we could tap into much more, and definitely with the with maybe it's easier to do. There's of course a whole group of people who are, the young people who want to become green and things, but actually to see how we can tap into the others who are not yet there. That is something which we're still kind of trying to find out how to do that.
That's exactly what we're trying to do, because we want everybody, as you know, in New York City to have a role, which means whether you're interested now or not, we want to get you there and prepare you so that you can come. All right, so I have a bunch of questions, but I see there's a bunch in the chat, so I'm going to invite either Rafal or Joanne to pull one out for us and from the audience and ask that question.
Thanks, Tanya. I think we have a good question about the lessons that have been learned from these projects, and have there been any infrastructure projects that didn't meet expectations or conversely actually exceeded the expectations?
Oh, I mean, I could spend hours talking about failures. I mean, of course, a lot of this is uncharted territory that we are walking into. And so, of course, we will also sometimes have failures and mistakes. In general, the projects that we have tried and tested, they are living up to the expectations. But we have found that in the process of designing, we have sometimes had to have many iterations before actually getting to that result, actually spending more time and more money in the process that we would normally do if we were just making a green space, because now we also have to take into consideration the hydraulic factor. The other thing that is sort of an unknown factor in this is actually the durability of the projects. How long will they actually last? Will they continue working? I mean, will the infiltration actually also work? Will it clean the water as it infiltrates, so you do not get pollutants into the groundwater, which we use for drinking in Denmark? And all of these questions is something where we can also say time will tell also what actually will happen. And I'm always saying that we are now perhaps in the second generation of adaptation projects in Copenhagen, and there'll be a third and a fourth and a fifth. And we will, of course, hopefully learn from that.
Yeah, I think for any innovation, it's built on small mistakes that are then and are not exceeding, and then trying to make it better and better and better. I mean, I think it's amazing to see if we look at the innovation of the polder roof. I showed you an example where there is a weir on top of the roof and it is keeping closed where in order to catch the rain, but when it's linked to the weather forecast, so that when the cloudburst is coming to happen, they open it to drain out the roof, and then they close it again so that the roof is empty when, of course, because that's what has to happen when there's cloudburst, the roof has to be empty. I mean, the innovations that have taken place in there with regards to how they link it, how they can, store it, how they can, that is of course based also on sometimes they think things went wrong, but it is amazing how they managed to upscale that, what they do in other countries, how they place it now in also in New York. And that has, I think, the scale of it has exceeded expectations tremendously.
Right. Thank you. All right. I'm looking at my questions here. Go ahead, Johanna. You want to pull out another one from the audience?
Sure. And I think this one also goes to you as well, Tanya.
Okay.
We have a question. The organizations like Green City Force have worked hard to build a green workforce in New York City, though. Unfortunately, the city often has difficulty funding structures for nonprofits. Do you see political advocacy as part of this solution?
All right. Well, I'll give my official answer first, and then I'll. Okay. So, Green City Force is a nonprofit organization, which means we are an AmeriCorps, partially federally funded government funding entity. So we try to create system change through education and examples. We are not a policy advocacy organization. We're not. It's against our compliance to be able to do that. So we don't go and campaign for people, but we try to educate people and show the model of what it looks like to invest in communities and young people to have a platform for growth and thriving in solutions that are place-based. So that's our approach. We try to like show by example what the future should be for cities and what that takes. And so that's our angle, I should say. That has actually helped us through various administrations in the city level to actually be consistently regarded as a positive model because of that. We love other groups that do that for us, but that's not our role. So that's what I would say from Green City Force. I don't know if Lykke or Lot want to.
Yeah, I mean,
offer.
we don't. That's one of the things I've always admired about the US is that you've got these organizations, nonprofit organization that are working, sort of being active, and we don't have them to the same extent in Denmark. We have a very, very large public sector. We pay a lot of tax, and we therefore expect the public sector to manage our problems. So our problem is sometimes actually getting people engaged. I mean, they're okay. They're very happy to be engaged in the planning of a project and discussing what's going to happen with this area. But the idea of perhaps taking on responsibility for maintenance of an area is much more difficult. I mean, you might have some wanting to start in the beginning, but they're young, and then they move 2 years later or 1 year later, and then it all falls apart. So we actually envy you for that type of organizations.
Here, same. Again, we have a strong government organizations. And definitely that was one of the things why Rainproof started. In that strong government, even different departments were looking at others to think that they were solving it. So the idea that the people, the community, that people from the private sector could even do their part and do also part where they're responsible for was something which has to come across. So even though the Netherlands is very low lying and is very, prone to all these climate changes and have to deal with it, the general public till definitely when we started Rainproof in 2014 wasn't so much aware of it. Due to some events, of course, that's now a bit changed. And that has changed this system as well. But there is definitely not so much. And then we have what is also a bit different in the Netherlands than in the States, which I've found out is it's very difficult from the government to keep on funding the same organizations over and over. So therefore, it's very difficult for these organizations to keep a kind of durability in it. And also, even if these organizations, like was an amazing organization which was bringing workforce to change people's houses to make them energy proof and climate proof. And they were using workforce from people who had been laid off in areas or from locals. So really kind of building up this workforce with youth. And they had this kind of agreement with the government or with the city to do this for a year. And then it had to go out to the market again to see if this organization could do it. And now another organization from the other side of the Netherlands has got it, which was a much more commercial one because they could go lower, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a whole, you can't give, there's a whole different way in how projects are given to and jobs are given to and funding is given to things than what I've seen in New York.
That's really interesting because it actually doesn't sound that much different, to be honest. I mean, I could get the time frame is maybe a little different, but so yeah, trying to get the handle around what you're talking about in terms of like the government priorities versus the private sector was just really interesting to think about because even when Lykke was talking about all the different agencies coming together and pooling their resources, like I love that conceptually. Like some in the city would tell you that still doesn't end up being enough of what needs to be invested. So it's always, the funding question is always out there. But I do want to ask one question that I think is related to what the direction we're going in at this point. I'm hearing all these really valuable, positive things about what has worked and why you all have had the success you've had. We know New York is full of challenges, right? And so one question is like every government has no-goes, which could be defined as aspects of implementation that they did not want to touch, be it policy or physical. What kinds of constraints were given to each of you in your projects, and how did you work through them? I know we talked about failures. We know that things don't always happen the way we planned, but were there actually any restrictions that you wanted to do that were actually pushed back on by the government or others? And could you talk a little bit about some of those examples?
Yeah, I briefly touched upon it in my presentation. I mean, when we started, the type of solutions that we wanted to do while using the other public infrastructure like streets and parks for storage of water and transport of water was not possible in the national legislation at the time in Denmark. So we basically had to spend about a year lobbying for a change in legislation and to spend an awful lot of time demonstrating that what we wanted to do would end up being cheaper for the citizens because they're paying for this through the water fees that they're paying for the water. So we had to demonstrate. We made a lot of business cases where we actually looked at what is actually, I mean, if you take this and do it the normal way by digging down big pipes and underground reservoirs or whatever it is, then it will cost so much. And if we do it the way we propose, it will actually be cheaper. So that was a huge constraint, and we spent a lot of time. And basically, I mean, the government has never liked what we ended up with, and now they're trying to pushing it back, making it more difficult for us to finance these projects. So there is this constraint in financing. I think the common idea was that we were using this as a way of getting water fees, utility money to finance maintenance and reconstruction of things in the city that should be paid by taxpayers' money.
We
So
had a
that
s-
would, yeah, that
yeah,
was our huge constraint.
I completely was actually, before you start talking, I wrote exactly the same constraint, like trying to see how sewage tax, and even for the rainproof money, they did something. They took it, you know, like how the program was funded in the start and how we were paid as, you know, like to work on it was from the sewage tax. And it was already a bit like if that was allowed to do that, and then to see if you can make this sewage tax do other things for public space and is really difficult. And that is why we were so jealous at actually Rotterdam, who made like by saying like, okay, so much rain taken out of the sewer is this much of gallons, is this much of money, and therefore we can pay with the sewer tax other beautification of your public realm and other things. That was a real kind of overcoming that burden. However, when we started with Rainproof, we didn't get any constraints because they didn't see us yet as kind of serious. So only after 2 or 3 years, when we became, you know, known, when we were getting all this, you know, publicity, but also getting these successes in the city, you started to feel like, oh, there are some things that actually can't happen and some things that can happen. And it even has to do with how you communicate or how we approach different things. And one thing, and I'm only becoming aware of it by working in New York, is actually something which is something we were not allowed to touch. In New York, we're looking at what can you do before, what can you do during, and what can you do after. In Amsterdam, with Amsterdam Rainproof, we are not looking at what we can do during. There are organizations for that, and you cannot touch that. That is a whole different level of organizations that are looking at it with the mayor, with the mayor of the water board. That's the levy count, it's called, with the fire department. There's a whole organization for that. So we don't look at during because we cannot really touch it. Of course, we had a kind of a warning system, but it was really difficult to get it in, like a kind of a rainproof warning getting out there. But the real during was something that was off limit.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yes, okay. Nice to know we all have challenges. So I'm gonna go back to Johanna in a minute, but the idea of the business case that Lykke talked about, that makes a lot of sense. And this whole theme of everyone's role to play, right, is like resonating with me because while my organization is not a policy and advocacy lead driver, we need that part of the team in New York City to be working at one end of the angle. We need the business case, we need the analysts, we need the strategists, the consultants, the architects, the planners. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to say, right? We're trying to say like this is a value and a positive thing. And I don't think I think I can say this honestly, there's nobody in New York City who doesn't want something that's a positive solution, but there's so many different views on what that looks like. And that's the joy and the challenge of a city of 8 million people. So, okay, Johanna, we have any other questions you want to lift up for us?
Sure. Yeah, we have a bunch in the chat, so hopefully we can make through a couple more. One of the questions that we have regards the high water table that was brought up in your presentation, Lot, and how does your rainproof infrastructure address address the rising water table, and what obstacles does that provide for managing stormwater?
Oh, it has a lot of obstacles. And one of the obstacles I can actually, because yes, and I'm sorry, I should know this in inches. I think it is, it's like 50 centimeters. It's half a meter, which is, I don't know. Sorry, I really don't know.
It's 1.5 foot, a little more than 1.5 foot.
Little more than 1.5 foot is our groundwater table in certain areas in Amsterdam underneath the surface. So we don't have any infiltration capacity in that area. And it also means that when we had like the last 3 months, we had the amount of rain of 8 months in the Netherlands, which created a lot of issues in our cities and in our country. It meant that that there is a whole debate going on between public and private. because the public needs to have a certain coverage above the groundwater level and above their sewer to maintain their surface level. So what they do, they raise the streets. However, when you're then so what we happen now in certain areas in Amsterdam is that they raise the street in order to keep that dry, as they are having to do. However, the houses and the gardens stayed low. So now some of that water from the streets makes it go into the gardens, and the gardens are becoming more wet. So the thing we are looking in Amsterdam is not so much infiltration, only where that is possible. So there are really areas where we can't do that, definitely the polder areas. But to look at retaining above ground, retaining on the roofs, and sometimes even putting bigger storage in, and using the surface water to retain in there as well, if we have that possibility.
I totally agree on that, because I mean, we also have a rising groundwater. We've also had an awful lot of rain in Denmark. There have been areas, not in Copenhagen, but there's been areas where the sewage system has been so overburdened that they have actually asked people not to use as much water because they couldn't actually manage it. So that was not in a cloudburst situation. It was just because it kept on pouring down for days and days and days. And we also have a high ground table level, and we are in exactly the same situation as Amsterdam. There's very little possibility for infiltration, also because of pollution issues, but also because of groundwater level, and because Copenhagen is built on clay. So there are lots of things why infiltration is not a good idea in Copenhagen, but it is something that we will have to deal with. Actually, part of our cloudburst plan is actually a little bit designed after the Dutch polder model, where there's actually making sure that if you have this, you can actually get the water out through the cloudburst streets into the sea. So there is this need to make sure that we are not pushing the groundwater level too much in Copenhagen. So it is a big problem.
So in this polder model, really asking, that is where Lykke was pointing on in her presentation, for integrated planning. You cannot do it on one spot. You have to look it into a system. You have to look it on a wider scale, and to see what happens and how in an event it can, come from step to step. So every drop counts, you catch it where it falls, but then you keep it, and store it as long as possible. But you have to be able to take it out to the next place and to the next place and the next place.
Yeah.
Sort of related to what you're talking about, one of the questions I saw in the chat asked about, you have the city and you have what you just said, right? You're measuring all the different outcomes, but do you each have a particular approach in, like, there's a specific project within the city, and then there's another project, right, in a different neighborhood? Do you have a benchmarking by project, or is it just all in the whole Magilla is the measure? Like, how do you assess sort of success and momentum or challenges, or do you rank different parts of the projects in terms of leaning more in to want to beef up the ones that seem to be working more effectively than others? Or just curious how you assess.
No, I mean, for us, it's you have to imagine it as some kind of a big jigsaw puzzle, where you have all the different pieces and you need to link them together. And each jigsaw puzzle piece has to fit. And if it doesn't fit, your puzzle will get all wrong. And it's the same way here. We have these projects that are connected, and sometimes you figure out that a project you had estimated this was going to handle so much water, it cannot do it because of, I don't know whatever reason. Then you have to sort of refigure the whole length of that.
Oh, I think we lost. I think we froze up.
Sorry, I lost.
We
I'm
got
back.
you. You're back.
I'm
Go
back.
ahead. You're back. Go ahead. Go ahead. Well, welcome back.
I don't know what happened. No, I just said, I mean, you have to see these things as linked. So that's why there's no individual projects, they all exist in connection with other projects.
Yeah, and in addition to that, it's not only that they connect in other projects like water connects, so that's how they have to connect, but also, and definitely in order to get the momentum, because you can't open the city in one go, and you have to link it to the strategic planning of other works. So for us, it's not so much that we say like, okay, this project is better than that project. It's actually where is the opportunity to link to the work that's already planned for other elements of the city. And with that, we did an analysis of the whole city of like what is the damage? If we look at the models, like really like, okay, how much damage is there? It's 900 million for a cloudburst event, and it's one event. And then we came up with a kind of an idea of like, and so what does it mean if we would make every project that we know, we made estimates like, okay, this much streets will change during this amount of time. This many gardens will change because every garden changes in 15 years. Every street change takes 20 years. The sewer takes 50 years. So how much will change in the city? Then we said like, okay, if we then make that change and add to that rainproof, so make it better in order to make it rainproof, how much of the city can you solve with that? How many percent per neighborhood? Then we cost that, and then not the total cost of the project, but only the addition to it, and saw like what is then the benefits. And then you see that you can't say like this measure is better than that measure, because it really depends on the other goals of the city of that location as well, and the other thing, momentum of the city. So we really try to connect it, and by showing that in this way, show that sometimes maybe for rainproof retention is the best, or keeping water out, but it doesn't link to all the other benefits. It doesn't have the greening, it doesn't have the so you do have to see like what is the local situation. You do have to see like what is the wish of the citizens there, and what are the other programs of the city to link to.
It makes sense, because as New Yorkers, we know in all our working group conversations there are place-based expertise, and there's like, from an equity perspective, there's some people are like, well, what you want to do there, that's not going to really work. What you really need is this. And so I'm thinking of it from a lens of like, if we know in one part of the city something's going really well, and there's a really high risk area in another part of the city, can we leverage that and be like, okay, you know what, we need to prioritize this other part of the city having that same positive outcome, because we see that that's affecting some positive change. So I get the overall assessment needs to be holistic, but that's how I was thinking about it. All right, Joanna, like we're coming down to the wire, so back to you.
Yeah, I think I'm going to group a couple of the questions together that all sort of get to the idea of what New Yorkers can do right now for those who are experiencing flooding and have been trying to elevate this issue in their community or to their electeds. What would you recommend they walk away from this webinar and begin doing?
I think in the work of working with these things, the local experience is extremely important, because that gives you the understanding of what's actually happening. There's no way that city officials, utility officials can be everywhere when there's something happening. So I think the need, I mean, I think Lot might be able to say much more about this, because I know that Amsterdam had some sort of reporting system. We also have a reporting system in Denmark, where you can actually sort of say something has happened here, and then the city has to look into it. It's not always they can fix it, but I think that's it. The other time, I mean, if these things don't work, then there's of course always the opportunity of seeing if you can get the community to act. Local community politicians, organizations, and so on, that you can engage and use actually sort of to make a shout out saying there's something wrong here. We are experiencing flooding again and again. It's affecting our property, all our assets, and our livelihood, or whatever. We need somebody to do something about it.
Yeah, and I think and correct me if I'm wrong, I think New York also has this reporting one with 311. So yes, the voices and the eyes on the street are extremely important for rain, because the models are never exactly showing what happened on the ground. And therefore it's extremely important for also the municipality and the departments to know that. However, I think the New Yorkers can also, depending, of course, it completely depends on your situation. Do you have an own property? Do you have access to kind of, different groups that are maybe intermediaries? Are you yourself an intermediary? So it really depends on your situation. So in a way, on New Yorkers, I think what I would say is like they should think like, okay, what can they do? What is the point of access that I can tap into or can influence of making something bigger and rainproof? So for instance, if you have your own house, yes, then if you have sometimes when you change something in the house, make it rainproof, like the garden, the roof, the discharge. But of course, there are many people don't have that. But maybe you have children in a school and you can see like, can you come up with the community around the school with things of greening the area? Maybe you have your linking to your work or your volunteering work in libraries, and you can do on education, or you can do on, or you're working in a small business and you can help your neighboring people if that business stays dry, and help people during an event. So there's so many positive actions that can help with small steps, but it really depends on your own situation, and therefore always ask where can you tap into. And I know that New York is busy with trying to get this kind of information, with kind of messages out there, what you can do before, what you can do during, and what you can do after.
Wonderful.
I saw one of the questions was about actually where NYCHA, I mean the public housing, had been doing something and they were still being flooded. I think there are two also issues with that. One being that there's a limit. I mean, the city will never be able to guarantee that you will never be flooded. I mean, you have to, when you do something, you do it to a certain design standard. You design to a specific type of event, a specific amount of rain. This is how much we can handle if we do this project. And if you then have an event that's twice as heavy, then you will still experience flooding. So that's one thing. The other thing is that something might have gone wrong, and that's when you need to shout out. And so I would definitely also try to contact, if in this case of NYCHA, saying, what has happened here? I mean, when we were flooded, was it because there was actually more rain than the project was designed for, or was it because not enough was being done? Because I mean, I very often have been given the question, when is Copenhagen going to be climate proof? And I always have to say never, because there can always be a heavier storm. And we have to understand that we design things to a specific level, but if we have something that's much higher than that, I mean, if you build the people in the Netherlands know, I mean, you build your levee to a certain height, and then you have a storm surge where it's a meter above that, they will still experience flooding behind the levees.
Okay. Well, thank you. I know we're coming in at time. I know we have been recording this, and so question for Rebuild team is like, are we able to capture the chat questions for any follow-up if needed? That's something we can do, since everyone didn't get, I think, all of their questions answered. Looking to
Yeah, we can save the chat and share it with the panelists.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you. Well, I am a native New Yorker, born and bred, and so I know that while there's like amazing things that happen in New York, challenges are exponentially bigger just because of the size and scale of New York. So one thing I would definitely recommend as a minimum, which you're already doing if you're on this call, is please follow the Rainproof NYC and Rebuild team's public information for resources. We're trying to come up with some outcomes, as Johanna mentioned, by June, around recommendations to help better inform communities across the city about not only the resources that currently exist, but how to better access information, to Lot's point, before, during, or after rain flood. So a really super huge appreciation to Lot and Lykke. We're glad that you shared your wisdom and experiences with us. We're glad that you actually have already been invested in supporting New York City's rainproofing. And I'm going to kick it back to either Rafal or Johanna, because I think, were you trying to say that this event here was April 14th?
Yep.
Go ahead.
So I realize that date actually is incorrect. So we'll correct that.
That's today.
That's today, yeah, on our calendar. But you can scan the QR code here. Please join us. This event is happening next week, I believe. And the details are in the chat. Rafal, if you don't mind dropping the link again, or you can go to our website, and we hope to see you at future events. And thank you all. And thank you, Tanya, for being a great host today. We really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.